On November 18, 1978, 900 Americans died in one night, in the middle of a jungle, following one man's orders. And the CIA had been watching the entire time. San Francisco, 1970, Jim Jones was the most powerful preacher in California. Politicians lined up to be seen with him. The poor worshipped him. Nobody asked where his money came from. He could fill any room in America with believers. He promised healing, salvation, a perfect world. What he actually wanted was something far darker. The FBI had a file on Jim Jones as early as 1972. Agent Wade had read every page 3 times. His superiors told him to keep watching. Nothing more. By 1975, he had over 20,000 followers across America. They gave him everything. Their savings, their homes, their children. He called it devotion. It was something else entirely. Sarah had joined the temple at 22 looking for community. 5 years later, she was afraid to leave. She didn't yet understand that was exactly what he had planned. In 1977, he moved his entire congregation to the Guyana jungle. He called it Jonestown, a paradise, a fresh start. The guards at the perimeter faced inward, not outward. Wade filed 17 reports warning about Jonestown. Each one was reviewed, filed, ignored. Nobody in Washington wanted to touch it. Inside Jonestown, the paradise had already become a prison. Passports confiscated, letters monitored, sleep deprivation enforced. Anyone who tried to leave was brought back. Sarah had tried to send a letter home 3 months earlier. It never arrived. She never tried again. She had begun to understand there was no way out. A US Congressman arrived in Guyana on November 17, 1978. He had come to investigate reports from worried families back home. He had no idea he would never leave. Morning announcements began at 5 a.m. every single day. Attendance was not optional. Nothing in Jonestown was optional. He reminded them daily that the outside world wanted them dead. Food was rationed as punishment and reward. Followers worked 12-hour days on near-empty stomachs. Hunger kept people too weak to think clearly about leaving. Washington had 17 warning reports sitting in folders. The official pushed the folder back across the desk. This is a religious matter, not our jurisdiction. The nightly meetings lasted until 3 a.m., sometimes longer. Followers who fell asleep were made examples of publicly. He called these sessions family meetings. They were interrogations. She had written the same letter 17 times and destroyed them all. Every letter was read before it left the settlement. She knew this. She kept writing anyway. He had run out of official channels to report through. Every warning ignored. Every report filed and forgotten. He started making calls from his personal phone after hours. In private, he was falling apart. The paranoia had become total. He believed the CIA was coming to destroy everything he had built. That fear would kill 900 people. When the congressman arrived, some followers saw their only chance. Passing notes, whispering, begging to be taken home. He watched every interaction from behind his tinted glasses. Some followers had begged to leave with the delegation. He had let them go, smiled, waved goodbye. Then he picked up his radio. One radio call. That was all it took. Everything that followed was already planned. Comment: did the US government fail these 900 people deliberately? The airstrip became a killing ground within minutes. The congressman never made it back to the plane. Washington received the news in silence. Declassified policial militar local time. Wade stood completely still for 30 seconds after hanging up. Then he opened his folder and began writing. Back in Jonestown, the final meeting had already begun. Everyone was there. Nobody had been given a choice. He stood at the microphone and spoke very quietly. Sarah understood what was happening before anyone said the words. She looked down at her Bible and then back up. There was nowhere left to go. From above, the settlement glowed like a single ember. 900 people surrounded by miles of impenetrable darkness. Completely alone. Completely cut off. Completely his. He spoke for 40 minutes before giving the final instruction. His voice never wavered, never broke, never hesitated. That was the most terrifying thing of all. Washington was still trying to reach the airstrip by radio. Nobody had any idea what was already happening in the pavilion. The jungle had swallowed every signal. Sarah closed her eyes and pressed the Bible against her chest. She thought about the family she had not spoken to in 2 years. She had never stopped loving them. The jungle surrounding the settlement was completely silent. Not even the birds were making sounds that night. As if everything in the darkness already knew. The lights in the pavilion burned until almost midnight. Then one by one they went out. The jungle took back the silence it had always owned. 917 people died that night. 304 of them were children. The US government had 17 warnings and acted on none. Comment: who do you think bears the most responsibility? He was found the next morning in his private room. The settlement around him completely still. He had outlived everyone he had led there. Wade received the full casualty report at 3 a.m. He read every name on the list. All 917 of them. Twice. Sarah survived because she had hidden in the jungle at dusk. She walked for 6 hours before finding a road. She never stopped walking until she reached a telephone. The medical building told investigators everything they needed to know. The supplies had been ordered months in advance. This had always been the plan. He had built something nobody in Washington wanted to look at directly. A community. A weapon. A sealed world with no exit. And they had let him build it with their silence. The Senate hearings began 3 weeks after the bodies were found. Wade testified for 4 hours without notes. He had been waiting 6 years to say it all out loud. By dawn, Jonestown was already being described as a tragedy. Wade used a different word in his testimony. The senators asked him to choose another one. Sarah sat alone outside for the first hour after she was found. She could not yet speak to anyone. She held her Bible and waited for the world to make sense again. Some followers had tried to escape into the jungle at the end. A few most not. The jungle kept its secrets for weeks afterward. The final recording from Jonestown runs for 44 minutes. It still exists. It has been heard by very few people. Those who have heard it do not describe it easily. 917 People. 17 warnings. 0 government action. One man built a prison in a jungle and called it paradise. Comment: which part of this story will stay with you the longest? The first teams reached Jonestown the following morning. Nothing they had been told prepared them for what they found. Several had to be relieved from duty immediately. Wade submitted his final report 2 weeks after the event. It ran to 340 pages. His superiors accepted it without comment or response. The Senate hearings produced thousands of pages of testimony. No criminal charges followed for any government official. The 17 ignored warnings were classified for 11 years. Sarah testified before Congress 8 months after Jonestown. She spoke for 2 hours without stopping. She brought her Bible but did not open it once. The jungle began reclaiming Jonestown within weeks. Within a year, most of the wooden structures had collapsed. The jungle is very patient about these things. Wade retired in 1981. He never stopped reading the file. He kept every report he had ever written about Jonestown, all 17 of them, in the same manila folder. Families sued the US government for negligence in 1979. The cases ran for years through the courts. Not one resulted in a finding of government responsibility. Sarah attended every hearing, every lawsuit, every memorial. She said she went so the names would not become just numbers. 917 names. She knew every single one. Wade attended the first memorial alone and stood at the back. He did not speak to anyone or place any flowers. He stayed until everyone else had gone. A researcher found the surviving documents in 1990. They confirmed what Wade had written in 1977. Every warning, every detail, every ignored report. Accurate. Sarah never returned to any church after Jonestown. She kept the Bible. She kept her faith. She simply never trusted another man who claimed to speak for God. The official government statement ran to 2 paragraphs. It expressed condolences. It accepted no responsibility. It was released on a Friday afternoon. Wade spent years cross-referencing every document that survived. He was looking for the exact moment someone could have stopped it. He found 17 of them. Within 5 years, Jonestown was being taught in psychology courses. Researchers used it to understand mass compliance and control. The survivors were rarely asked what they thought about that. Sarah saw a therapist for 11 years after Jonestown. Her therapist said she was the most resilient person she had ever treated. Sarah said resilience was just another word for having no other choice. The declassified files filled 43 archive boxes. Researchers are still working through them today. Some sections remain classified without explanation. Sarah spoke publicly about Jonestown for the first time in 1985. She had spent 7 years deciding whether anyone deserved to hear it. She decided the 917 who could not speak deserved someone who would. The CIA files on Jonestown were partially released in 1995. They confirmed surveillance had been ongoing since 1974. They did not explain why the surveillance produced no intervention. Sarah visited the memorial wall every year on November 18th. She always came alone. She always stayed until dark. She touched the same photograph every single time. 917 names are carved into a memorial wall in Oakland, California. It took 11 years after Jonestown to build it. Funding was difficult to secure. Nobody wanted to be associated with it. Wade read every declassified document the day they were released. He found 3 things that had never appeared in any report he had seen. He did not share what they were with anyone. The story ran on every major news network for 3 weeks. Then it was replaced by other stories. The survivors noticed exactly how long 3 weeks felt. Sarah sat in the congressional gallery and listened to officials explain. She had been there. She knew what the explanations left out. She wrote every omission down in the margins of her Bible. Jonestown appears in textbooks now alongside other historical events. Students study it for an hour and move on to the next chapter. Sarah has spoken to some of those classrooms. She never rushes. Wade spoke to a journalist once about what he knew, off the record, in a restaurant, for 3 hours. The journalist never published a word of it. The government released 5,000 pages of Jonestown documents in 2008. Researchers called it a significant step toward transparency. Wade called it 30 years too late. Sarah walked into the government building to give formal testimony. She had waited 9 years for this moment. She wore the same plain, modest dress she had worn in Jonestown. Researchers found traces of the settlement foundation in 2015. The jungle had taken almost everything back. What it could not take back were the names. Wade kept the folder on his kitchen table for 30 years. Every morning he saw it when he sat down for breakfast. He said it was the only way he knew to keep the promise he had made. Every November 18th, Sarah placed 917 flowers at the memorial, one for each name. She never missed a year. She said it took most of the day, and that was exactly the point. Wade filled 42 personal journals over 30 years. Every entry connected to something he had seen or read or remembered. He left them to the National Archive when he died.
So when we look at this
Students
specific detail,
in classrooms
what does it
across America
symbolize
now
for their
study what
cosmology?
happened.
It represents
They
the
read
journey
documents,
through the underworld.
watch our
Specific
recordings,
detail, what does it symbolize
write
for their
essays.
cosmology? It
None of them have met
represents the journey
Sarah.
through the
Most of
underworld.
them should. Sarah wrote everything down so it would exist after she was gone. Every detail she could remember. Every name she knew. She said memory was the only justice most of them would ever get. The archive building holds what is left of the paper record. Researchers still find new connections in the documents every year. The full story has still not been completely told. The jungle has taken almost everything back now, but 917 names remain, carved in stone, permanent. The question history keeps asking is simple: who was responsible